ज्ञानञ्जन चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवंश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणा रघुनाथं विधं सजीवम् साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादं सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितंश्च। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीना बंधु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कंठ राधा कंठ नमस्तुते। जयतम सुरतो पंगोर मामा मंदिर मतेर्गति मत्सर्वस्व पदम भोजो राधा मादन मोह दिव्याद वृंदरण्य कल्पद्रुमदः श्रीमत् रत्नागार सिंहासनस्थो श्रीमद् राधा शील गोविंद देवो पृष्ठालिभि सेविमनो स्मरामि श्रीमन् रस रसारंभि वंशी पठतस्तुतः कर्षण वेणुस्तनेर गोपी गोपीनाथ श्रेयस्तु नः तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो ओं विष्णुपदाय कृष्ण प्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी इति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पश्चात्तदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार शिवा सदि गौर भक्त वृंदा। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 रामा राम राम हरे हरे। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। So today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, third canto, entitled The Status Quo, chapter 14, entitled Pregnancy of Diti in the Evening, and verse 48. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chevam Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet. Nashta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavati Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama Shloker Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So again, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam 3:14-48. We'll go through the Sanskrit once, translation, and then we'll move over to the purport by Srila Prabhupada. Aha, is that on the screen? Wonderful. Very good. Excellent. Okay. Save Mahabhagavato Mahatma Mahanubhavo Mahatam Mahishtaha Pravriddha Bhaktya Hin Anubhavittayasa Niveshya Vaikuntham Imam Vihashyati. The topmost devotee of the Lord will have expanded intelligence and expanded influence and will be the greatest of the great souls. Due to mature devotional service, he will certainly be situated in transcendental ecstasy and will enter the spiritual sky after quitting this material world. So Srila Prabhupada is referring to, so just to recap, this chapter is about how, for those of you who have seen the Narasimhadev movie, or those of you who are familiar with the pastimes of Lord Narasimhadev, Kashyapa, who is one of the Manasa Putras, the Das Manasa Putras, the 10 sons of Brahma who manifested from Lord Brahma's mind. We've gone through that on several previous classes, but they also include the 4 Kumaras, they include Narada Rishi, they include Lord Shiva, but also the Prajapatis, Atri, and also Kashyapa. So these Dasmanasa Putras were actually created by Lord Brahma for the purposes of being a Prajapati. Prajapati means those who were responsible for populating the material universe. So Kashyapa's Swadharma, his occupational duty, along with being a Brahmana, his incumbent duty is to populate the world. But even though this is his duty, there are still niyam, rules and regulations by which one must conduct one's dharma. One's dharma may be a police officer, but that doesn't mean that one can simply recklessly drive around, arrest whoever, enforce the law capriciously. No, there are certain rules and regulations which guide the proper conduct. In the same way, even though Kashyapa Muni is a Prajapati and the son of Lord Brahma, with the incumbent duty of producing offspring, there are still rules and regulations which accompany that occupational duty. Now, the conception of his children, particularly with Diti, so he has two principal wives, Diti and Aditi. And from Diti come the Daityas, or the Asuras, and from Aditi come the Devas, or the demigods. So Diti, at the wrong time, generates these lusty passions. And despite Kashyapa Muni saying this is not the right time to conceive, she forces him, he yields, and ultimately he explains to her the consequences of her having these. He explains the consequences of the womb, the child that she has now begotten in the womb, and the nature of that child, how they will torture the innocent, they will degrade the women. And it's quite a long list, actually, from about verses, maybe if it's possible, Prabhu, whoever's in charge of the screen, if you could put up just the straight translations for chapter 14, from about verse, let's say verse, anyway, okay, no, if you go back, anyway, I'll read it out, don't worry, you can from verse 30, verse 34, 35, verse 38, right? So from verse 38, the learned Kashyapa said, because of your mind being polluted, because of the defilement of the time, because of your negligence of my directions, because of your being apathetic to the demigods, everything was inauspicious during the time of conception. O haughty one, you will have two contemptuous sons born of your condemned womb. Unlucky woman, they will cause constant lamentation to all the three worlds. And if you remember, the last verse that I read on was number 30, where Maitreya refers to her as a prostitute. I mean, she's the lawfully married wife of Kashyapa. And all she did was pull on his dhoti at an inappropriate time. And look, how kind of absolute are the words of Kashyapa Muni. And he goes on to describe the two children, who will be Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha. They will kill poor, faultless living beings, torture women, and enrage the great souls. At that time, the Lord of the universe, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the well-wisher of all living entities, will descend and kill them, just as Indra smashes the mountains with his thunderbolts. Diti said, it is very good that my sons will be magnanimously killed by the arms of the Personality of Godhead with his Sudarshan weapon. O my husband, may they never be killed by the wrath of the Brahmana devotees. So Diti immediately, if somebody told you that your son was going to be an absolute terror to the planet and would ultimately be killed, most people would be shocked. Diti here this is her high quality intelligence. She's already seeing the fact that her sons will be killed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a silver lining to this whole situation. Verses 44 to 45. The learned Kashyapa said, because of your lamentation, penitence, and proper deliberation, and also because of your unflinching faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and your adoration for Lord Shiva and me, one of the sons, Sri Prahlad, of your own son, Hiranyakashipu, will be an approved devotee of the Lord, and his fame will be broadcast equally with that of the personality of Godhead. His fame will be equal to that of the personality of Godhead. In order to follow in his footsteps, saintly persons will try to emulate his character by practicing freedom from animosity, just as the purifying process is rectified gold of inferior quality. Everyone will be pleased with him because the personality of Godhead, the supreme control of the universe, is always satisfied with the devotee who does not wish for anything beyond him. And now we come on to our verse. That topmost devotee of the Lord, Sri Prahlad, will have expanded intelligence and expanded influence and will be the greatest of the great souls. Due to mature devotional service, he will certainly be situated in transcendental ecstasy and will enter the spiritual sky after quitting this material world. So that again just brings the context back in. This verse is talking about the greatest of the great souls, but in particular, the greatest of the great souls is going to be Sri Prahlad, who ironically will become the son of the lowest of the low who have ever been born. You know, the terrorist amongst all terrorists, right? Who doesn't just terrorize a town, who doesn't terrorize a village, who doesn't terrorize a country, who doesn't terrorize a planet, but he terrorizes every living being from the topmost planet all the way down to the bottommost planet of this universe. So powerful that he knocks the earth out of orbit. Well, Hiranyaksha, the older brother of Hiranyakashipu, knocks the earth out of orbit and plunges it into the causal ocean, which Varahadev then needs to come and retrieve. But in spite of that happening, still there is an opportunity for Prahlad to be born in such a circumstance. How ironic, How ironic that the son of Brahma, whose duty it is to conceive and to have Prajapatis and have progeny, to bear offspring, because of a slight fault in his niyam, he has the world's most wicked son. And yet that most wicked son, who's following no dharma, no Garbhodan, he doesn't even accept Lord Narayan, he will then have progeny who is considered the greatest of all great souls. How can that come to pass? How can that be? So this verse is very interesting. We can move on to the purport now. This verse is very interesting to see this comparison. We're talking about consciousness and conception and how that should yield particular offspring. And yet we have an almost faultless Brahminical pair who have a demon. And then we have a demon who is almost irredeemable, who has the greatest of all great. So if we move on to the purport, Prabhu, maybe it would be useful for everybody to read the purport. Perfect. So purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Bhai Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. There are three stages of transcendental development in devotional service, which are technically called Sthayi Bhav, Anubhav, and Mahabhav. Continual perfect love of Godhead is called Sthayi Bhav. And when it is performed in a particular type of transcendental relationship, it is called Anubhav. But the stage of Mahabhav is visible amongst the personal pleasure potency of the Lord. It is understood that the grandson of Diti, namely Prahlad Maharaj, would constantly meditate on the Lord and reiterate his activities. Because he would constantly remain in meditation, he would easily transfer himself to the spiritual world after quitting his material body. Such meditation is still more conveniently performed by chanting and hearing the holy name of the Lord. This is especially recommended in this age of Kali. So very interesting, very interesting. the first point that is worth mentioning is that there are 10 topics of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Shukadev Goswami says in the second canto, 10th chapter, first verse, Sri Shuka Vacha, Atra sargo visargascha stanam poshanam uttaya manvantaresha nukta nirodho muktir ashraya. So 10 different topics. Sarga, right? Visarga, stanam poshanam uttaya, manvantara, isha anukta, nirodha, mukti, ashraya. Sarga, creation, visarga, sub-creation, stanam, the planetary systems, poshanam, the protection, uttaya, the creative impetus of the Lord, manvantara, the different manus in the passage of time, isha anukta, the science of God and all of his expansions, nirodha, once we find ourselves in the universe, how do we go back to Godhead, mukti, and become liberated and free from the suffering here? And finally, ashraya, ashraya, the summum bonum is what Srila Prabhupada calls it. But Jiva Goswami refers to it as the topmost good. What is the greatest thing to aspire for? Is it winning the World Cup? Is it winning the Cricket World Cup? Is it winning the Cricket World Cup at home in front of Narendra Modi? Is it something else than that? Or is it something entirely different? So actually the topics here, the greatest of the great, Bhagavatam is calling this individual Prahlad the greatest of the great. Not because he's a great cricket player, not because of his beauty, even though he had tremendous beauty, not because of his intelligence or his feats in this world. Why is he the topmost devotee of the Lord? Due to his mature devotional service. The greatest of the great is not somebody who has achieved the feats in this world. He is one who is mature in his devotional service. Why? Why does that define? Why we can read it on the paper, but why does that define somebody as the greatest of the great? That is the greatest of the great because that is Jivera Swarupa Hoy KrishnaArjuna Das. Because Jivera Swarupa Hoy, the Swarup, the eternal nature of oneself, KrishnaArjuna Das is eternally that. This life we are Mr. Such and such, and next life we are Mrs. Such and such, and the life after we may be dog such and such. Whatever we achieve in this life is good for a limited time. The maturity of our devotional service is the defining feature of all time. You know, I often give the example of if you have a tremendous time in the airport, but you miss the flight to your destination, even if you have a great 2 or 3 hours in the airport, is it worth having those great 2 or 3 hours if you forego weeks or months at your destination? Better that your time in the airport is uneventful. And you guarantee that you get to your destination on time. You guarantee that you get to the right gate and get on the right plane and you get to your destination. Of course, the anticipation of knowing that you're getting to your destination will make your time in the airport still brilliant. Whereas even if you're doing all of these things, there's something nagging in the back of your mind. Okay, this is great, but I actually need to get to where I need to get to. In fact, it's actually said there's an urban myth that actually there is subliminal messaging in the airport, which says keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. I have nobody to verify this, but it's a bit like the Paramatma in the heart. He doesn't physically come and push you over there, but he's saying, it's not here, it's not here, it's not here, it's somewhere else. So the greatest of the great is one who has mature devotional service. But how interesting that the greatest of the great was the son of a demon, and not just any demon, the worst demon, the type of demon that makes even Ravan, even Kants, even Jagai and Madai pale in comparison. Pale in comparison. It's actually said that Ravan went to Bali Maharaj. Bali Maharaj is then the grandson of Prahlad. He was also a great devotee. Bali, just as Prahlad worshipped Narasimhadev, Sri Bali Maharaj worshipped Vamandev. There's a whole pastime here. But that Ravan who was part of the same clan, went to go and see Bali Maharaj when Lord Ram had vowed to kill him. And he said, my dear Bali Maharaj, you are my ancestor, and you must reestablish the greatness of the Asuras against this upstart Sri Ram. And Bali Maharaj said, just before you give me your soliloquy and your monologue, I want you to go and lift that mound over there. And Ravan said, what is this mound? I've even lifted Kailash Parvat. Well, I'll easily be able to lift this mound. So he walked over, he tried to lift this golden mound, and he struggled and he struggled and he tried. He couldn't even move it 1 millimeter. And Bali Maharaj turned to him and he said, do you know what that is? And Ravan said, no, what is that? Bali Maharaj said, that is the earring of Hiranyakashipu. That is the earring of Hiranyakashipu. And this Ramachandra previously came as Narasimhadev. And as easily as a lion can split a wasp, his head and his abdomen, with that ease, this same Ramachandra came in as Narasimhadev and just split Hiranyakashipu, our ancestor, in two. And you are coming to me to say we should go? I mean, first of all, this is my worshipable Lord. And second of all, don't start fights that you have no chance of winning. You can't lift the earring of Hiranyakashipu. And Hiranyakashipu was split like a wasp. So who are you who cannot even lift the earring to take on Sri Ramachandra? So we must understand that the wickedness and the power of Hiranyakashipu or Hiranyaksha, they appeared in the Satya, was unlike anything of these demons today, nothing. I mean, they would take the planet out of orbit. And yet Prahlad emerged as their son. So Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a very famous verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 33rd chapter, 7th verse. Oh, how glorious are they whose tongues are chanting your holy name. Even if born in the family of dog eaters, such persons are worshipable. Persons who chant the holy name of your lordship must have executed all kinds of austerities and fire sacrifices and achieved all the good manners of the Aryans to be chanting the holy name of your lordship. They must have bathed at all places of pilgrimage, studied the Vedas, and fulfilled everything required. Srila Prabhupada says in the purport that a person who has once offensively chanted the holy name of Krishna becomes immediately eligible to perform Vedic sacrifices. Once. Prabhupada then goes on about how we shouldn't doubt the potency of the holy name. But the point is that the holy name rectifies any of the misgivings of this material world. It rectifies all of the misgivings of this material world. And in fact, we need to start to develop this consciousness. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur is actually the one. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, for those of you who don't know, is the father of the guru of Srila Prabhupada. And he's actually the guru of the guru of Srila Prabhupada. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Guru KrishnaArjuna Das Prabhuji, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and then Srila Prabhupada. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was an incredible scholar in at least 3 languages, Sanskrit, Bengali, and English. And in Jaiva Dharma, we often hear about the material energy and the spiritual energy. We must avoid the material energy to reestablish ourselves in the spiritual energy. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he actually doesn't make this same distinction. He doesn't make this same distinction. He says that actually everything in this world is stemming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What needs to change is the vision of those who are interacting with the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everything in this world, material or physical, is ultimately stemming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But what needs to change is our vision and how we interact with the energy. And if we can correct our consciousness, we will ultimately see it in relation to the Supreme Lord. In the way that Diti is told, your son will be killed and will be a killer. But she then focuses on, but he will be killed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, his appearance will then invoke the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So her consciousness is such that she is looking at even a devastating situation, but can see the Lord's hand behind it. And therefore, her vision is spiritual, even in the face of an incredible reversal. Yes, this demon son will come, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead will come. The Supreme Personality of Godhead will redeem that demonic son, will redeem all residents of this universe just by his presence, and will ultimately be the cause of me having a wonderful grandson who is not just good, but is the greatest of all great souls. You know, we can also come into this situation whenever we have reversals of lamentation, of a feeling of complete helplessness. You know, when I read the story of Abhimanyu and how he was surrounded by his own family members at the age of 16 and mercilessly attacked, abused, killed, encircled, I think it would be very, very difficult for me to ever be able to process that, to ever be able to see the Lord's hand behind that situation. And then after that happens, the son of my husband, let's say I was Draupadi Maharani, then the son of my husband's guru, Ashwatthama, then after the war has concluded, kills my 5 sons in their sleep. And then she ultimately forgives Ashwatthama. Could I have that kind of consciousness to see the Lord's hand? It's very difficult. But the great souls, just like Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying that there is no mind, the great souls do cultivate, they cultivate this mentality. And it's important when cultivating a mentality that, first of all, we understand the principles. We understand the principle, that we can understand the principle that sugar is not good for our health. That's gyan. And yet we can understand in theory that sugar is not good for our health, but then we're smashing red velvet cupcakes that very same evening. So gyan is to understand the principle. And vigyan is to understand that principle so deeply that it guides our behavior in a particular way. It's not just a theoretical thing. And that can happen in 2 ways. Actually, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says there's 5 stages of awakening of one's consciousness. There's achadita chetana. Chetana means consciousness. Achadita chetana, which is a covered consciousness. Imagine this like a seed which is in the ground. You can't see the seed. It's buried in the ground. The potential is there, but the seed is in the ground and it's dormant. And then you have something which is called Shankuchita Chetana, which is like sprouting consciousness. It's like the seed that sprouts. It's a little green shoot. And when all seeds sprout, they pretty much look the same, little green shoots. You couldn't tell if this is going to be a great tree or a flower or a bush or a piece of grass. It's just sprouted. So the potential is starting to become realized. So covered consciousness, you could say, is in like totally dormant consciousness is in like a plant. The plant is alive, so the jiva must be in there. But the potential of the jiva to think, to feel, to love Krishna is almost completely switched off. I mean, a plant will respond to light. It will grow towards the light, and it can pollinate, and certain sound vibrations can actually encourage plants to grow. But really, you can't have a conversation with the plant. You know, a plant doesn't go through a range of emotions. A plant doesn't really express its desires, because that's the achadita chetana, the covered consciousness, the contracted consciousness, the slight showing of potential is, for example, in an animal or birds. You know, they start to, you know, some animals will have friends and they'll have enemies and they'll have groups, and there's a bit more kind of awakened conscious, but it's not fully there. Beyond that is the budding consciousness. So imagine that plant has now become a bud, a bud for a flower. That kind of consciousness is called Mukulita Chetana, budding consciousness. Beyond that is partially blooming consciousness. And after that is fully blooming consciousness. So the budding consciousness really only at the human form of life. And that, to be fair, not all humans even have this kind of consciousness. But if you're somewhat like an atheistic moralist, if you're a materialist, you're beginning to question the purpose of life and responsibility and why am I here, then that's where the bud has started to appear. You're not a shoot, you're a bud. Right? So you're getting there. When you start to have some actual spiritual realization, when you start to realize that life comes from life rather than life coming from matter, that life animates matter, but matter does not give rise to life. And we can see that because it takes two living individuals to produce another living individual. People talk about evolution, but where have we ever seen inanimate matter spontaneously becoming cognizant or sentient being? You know, they say, oh, well, millions of years ago this happened. Okay, if it happened millions of years ago that single cell amoebas were just appearing out of a primordial soup, why is that not happening now? That same principle that applied billions of years, we should have new life forms popping up every, doesn't happen. Life comes from life, comes from life. Every offspring has an origin and we have a descendant. Not that they just, new life forms start springing up. No, why is that happening? Because we are alive. What causes life? Something beyond the matter. So when you start to come to that realization that beyond just the material, the water, the amino acids, these may be able to give direction to life, but they're not the cause of the life. Just like the light bulb gives direction to the electricity, which is actually the source of light. The light bulb is just the via medium, but not that the light bulb itself is the cause of light. The light bulb simply has the ability as the Shaktiman to guide the Shakti and transform it into light. But the light bulb in isolation has no value. Equally, the material body in isolation has no value. Only the presence of the soul creates wonderment and ability and something to appreciate in the human body, in the physical vessel. As soon as that soul is taken away, in half an hour, rigor mortis, body starts to degenerate and starts to denigrate. And that same body that everyone loved becomes something horrific and shocking. If you may sit next to somebody that you love for decades, but if you keep a dead corpse, that same body next to you for 1 year, people would send you to jail. Why is that? Because the body is not the source of what we value. It is simply a conduit of the soul, which is what we are appreciating. So that is when we start to come to that realization that beyond the physical, there is something spiritual. That is when we come to the blooming consciousness. And when that is fully realized, the complete spiritual awakening, Srila Prabhupada has talked about Bhava Bhakti. He's talked about Bhava Bhakti in Mahabhav. So Sthayi Bhav Anubhav. We're not going to have time to get to all of that. Sthayi Bhav Anubhav and Mahabhav. That Mahabhav, which the gopis of Vrindavan, headed by Srimati Radharani, have, when that fully bloomed consciousness, that they realize that they are the spiritual entity, that the spiritual entity has an eternal relationship with Krishna. Sthayi means permanent bhav, and is experiencing and is living that not just theoretically gyan, but with full vigyan, is actually involved in that whole relationship, actively, proactively, is experiencing that reciprocation, is seeing the smile on Krishna's face, is feeling the tenderness of Krishna's love, is engaging in those daily Astakalya Leela, those eightfold daily pastimes of worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is actually absorbed in those things. That is when the consciousness is fully blown. They are not just theoretically understanding that they are a spiritual component beyond this world. They are moment to moment living it. They know what their face looks like in the spiritual world. They know what Krishna's face looks like in this spiritual world. They know the exact color of Krishna's dhoti. They know what Krishna's footprints look like as he walks through the Vrajraj in Goloka Vrindavan. That is fully bloomed consciousness. And that is actually what we are working towards. When we can realize that that is our permanent situation, and this material world is just something temporary, and we are not just theoretically understanding this, but we have fully realized this moment to moment, that is when we can have fully bloomed consciousness. Diti is starting to show a tendency towards that, because rather than lamenting about the difficulties in this world, rather than feeling overwhelmed by the reverses of this material world, we can use anything, and we should use everything as impetus, as fuel, as a catalyst, as reinforcement for us to reapply ourselves to understanding that true spiritual nature. I mean, this is not just a theory. And in fact, if we will move on to the concept of Staiva. The Goswamis have enunciated and have elucidated the principles of interacting with the Supreme Lord and the enjoyment of engaging in that service to such detail. There is no way this could just be some concocted theory, and we'll get to that now. So the principle is that nothing in this world is material. Everything is spiritual. Everything is stemming from the Supreme Lord. And if we are able to look at it in such a way that we may have a so-called reversal here, but if we have the right consciousness, even that reversal can make us akinchana gochara, materially exhausted. And we can use that as fuel for us, for the even greater good, the actual function. For example, they closed the lounge at the airport. Where will I sit? I'll have to sit down at the gate. It's so busy. And my kids are running around, and my wife's going to go to duty free, and it's going to blow our budget even before we've left on holiday. Oh my God, what will we do? The holiday is ruined. That's the materialistic thing. Oh, this is terrible. The higher consciousness is, okay, lounge is closed. We go directly to the gate. And even if we have to stay there for 1 hour, we are getting on that flight. No distractions. We are getting to where we need to go to. Same principle in the material world. I wanted to do this and I wanted to do that. And if I would have done this, then I could have done that. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is everything in this world is a fallible soldier. We'll get to that in the 5th canto when Rishabdev instructs this out. Every single thing in this world is a fallible soldier. Your bank balance, your house, the so-called loved ones, your strength, your whatever opulence you have will eventually forsake you. It can distract you, and it can distract you and take your most precious commodity, which is your time. You're pursuing after all of those to the exclusion of your actual eternal occupation. You're getting so sidetracked by all of that that you don't do justice to this thing, this spiritual realization, which is actually the function here. So if all of that goes for a toss, fine. It's regrettable. But what's the flip side? Wholeheartedly engage in this. Kunti says, give me more calamities. Give me more calamities. Give me more calamities. Are there any more calamities that Kunti could have had? Give me more calamities. Why? Because you're king, and she was high quality queen, one of the leading families across all of Bharat Varsha, who could directly speak with the demigods. And she's saying, I don't care about any of that. Give me calamities. What is it that we've got to be upset about, right? Our little 5-bedroom houses in Hertfordshire or wherever we are in Eldoret, 3-bedroom house, 5, whatever it may be, a few cars. These people had, when they would get married, 100,000 elephants would go with them and maidservants and mountains of gold. And they're like, forget all of that. And we're so, oh no, what if I lose my phone? Like little trinkets and toys, no opulence whatsoever. I was hoarding and so desperate to enjoy it. And Kunti is saying, forget all of this. This is all pointless. This is just going to let me down. Give me calamities. Take this all away. Give me this. So that consciousness, the question of the consciousness, we can become like even in so-called reversals, we start to develop the right mentality. Do we have time? Okay, let's quickly do it. So there's a part of the Bhagavad Gita that I always like to reference in terms of creating this right consciousness is Bhagavad Gita 255 to 264. We're going to have time to go through it. Effectively, Krishna is saying, when a man gives up all variety of desire for sense gratification, which arises from mental concoction, when his mind is purified and he finds satisfaction in the spiritual self alone, he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. Not be able to get through all of this. See, one who's able to withdraw his senses from sense objects, as the tortoise draws its limb within the shell, is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. When you're not going out, we're in this world, so we have to engage in this world. But when you're not overly infatuated with the things in this world, and you realize ultimately it is what it is, that is when your consciousness is right, to be able to see the spiritual hand at play and not be overly buffeted by the happiness and distress of this world. Though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experience a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. So this means we can't just artificially, it's like we were talking about the cupcake. We can't just say, cupcakes are bad for you. Cupcakes are bad for you. No, you need to experience the higher taste. The higher taste doesn't mean a bigger cupcake. The higher taste means health, where you haven't been addicted to sugar and cupcakes. And when you realize how happy and healthy and vibrant you can be without tons of processed sugar, even though you can say, yeah, that will feel great. But actually, my lifestyle without sugar is so much better. I'm not really that bothered. Our good friend Ash hasn't eaten sugar in God knows how long, decade, or at least a couple of years, no refined sugar. And you put the best sugary prasadam in front, he's not interested, because he said, actually, whatever momentary happiness that gives me, it is nothing compared to the well-being I feel now. Again, when you start to feel the higher taste of spiritual bliss and contentment, the things of the senses and the sense objects just pale into comparison. At first, you might have to discipline yourself, but then moving forward, it becomes a lifestyle choice. This is the point, 260. The senses are strong and impetuous. They carry away a man of discrimination. We're trying to get, what's the verse I'm trying to get to? 262, when contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. Lust means the desire to enjoy this thing. It doesn't just mean the sexual lust. It can be a sexual lust, but it can also be, I want that money, I want that car, I want that fame, I want that position. From lust. And then when that desire comes and it's frustrated, then we become anger. When there's one car left and one promotion left and somebody else takes it, I become angry. And from anger, complete delusion arises. This is 263. And from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So we were talking about developing the jnana and then transferring that jnana into vijnana. So you can develop the principle of jnana. I'm not this body, I'm the spirit soul. The activities of the body, which are not conducive for spiritual realization, should be given up. Just that we can say sugar is bad for me. And if somebody puts a cake, you say, no, I know it's bad for me. But that means that I shouldn't then fill my house full of cupcakes and then say, and have to meditate on it. Because what the Bhagavad Gita is saying, if you're constantly exposing yourself to that thing, by contemplating, thinking, feeling, willing, doing, you start to develop an attachment to enjoy, and then a lust, and then an anger, then you become overwhelmed, and then your intelligence, that jnana will be swept away, and you will engage in that same thing you're training yourself not to engage in. So when we were talking about the 5 levels of consciousness, one of the ways in which we can cultivate this higher consciousness, this full spiritual consciousness, Bhagavad Gita is giving us a practical tip. How do we get to that higher spiritual consciousness? Do not expose yourself to the temptations of the sense objects if they are avoidable.
All right, let's drink, Krishy.
Right? Don't engage yourself. Don't expose yourself to those things unnecessarily. These are the practical tips that we can engage.
Can you kick a ball a bit? Can you kick a ball a bit from distance?
Unshoe. Mute, brother. We need a mute button for you, brother.
I'm so sorry. Sorry.
No problem at all. So that's 263. And okay, so these are one of the practical tips that we can engage in. Now so that's how we cultivate our consciousness to the higher level. Let's quickly go back to I'm conscious of the time now. Let's quickly go back to the purport, and we're talking about Sthayi Bhav. 3 types of transcendental development. So we talked about that highest consciousness. We've gone from the seed to the sprout to the closed bud, partially blooming bud, fully bloomed bud. Now, when that bud is in full bloom, there's actually 3 stages of blooming and in full bloom. 3 stages of blooming, which are known as Sthayi Bhav, Anubhav, and Mahabhav. But we'll just focus on Sthayi Bhav. So Sthayi Bhav, or permanent love. Bhav means mood. People have different moods. Some people are like this, some people are like that. Bhav means mood. And Ras means enjoyment. So there are 5 permanent moods, 5 Sthayi Bhavs that one is actually situated in eternity in the spiritual world. Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. Those 5. Shanta, they can be neutral. Actually, only Balaram accepts neutral. Krishna has a dhoti. That dhoti feels ecstasy when it's worn by Krishna. Krishna has a flute. That flute feels ecstasy when it's played by Krishna. It said that when Krishna touches the trees, they start to bloom. When Krishna walks on the ground, it feels ecstasy, even the little grains in the spiritual world. So you can serve Krishna in that way. Generally, that is occupied by the Sandhani potency, Balaram. Balaram expands himself into all the paraphernalia and the forum in which Krishna enjoys. Above that is Dasya Ras, the servants of Krishna. Krishna has servants in Vaikuntha who are constantly cleaning Vaikuntha and serving him. He has servants in Goloka Vrindavan who help him get dressed, who prepare him food, help him brush his teeth, help him brush his hair. Then above that, you have Sakya Ras, cowherd boys. Their Sthayi Bhav, Sakya, is that of friendship, brotherhood, and there's no formality in that Sthayi Bhav, especially in Goloka. In Vaikuntha, you can't put Narayan in a headlock. In Goloka Vrindavan, not only are they sometimes wrestling Krishna, sometimes they climb on Krishna's back and they're like, Krishna, you lost, you carried me to the river. Vatsalya Ras, parental. Forget about putting Krishna in a headlock. Mother Yashoda ties Krishna up with rope. The Supreme Lord, who we've described, can crush Hiranyakashipu's abdomen like a wasp. Right? A little cowherd lady is tied up to a wooden grinding mortar. How does she become more powerful than Hiranyakashipu? Because of her love. And that is the power of Sthayi Bhav, Vatsalya Bhav. And then ultimately the topmost part, the topmost Sthayi Bhav, which encapsulates all of the others, the Dasya, the Shanta, the Dasya, the Sakya, the Vatsalya, is that of Madhurya, that of the gopis. Sometimes Krishna has a fever and the gopis take care of Krishna like he's their son. Sometimes the gopis play pranks on Krishna. Sometimes they dress up as cowherd boys and they go out and they start tending. They play games with Krishna as if they're his friends. Sometimes they serve Krishna like menial servants, cooking and preparing. Sometimes Krishna, they even say, we will, anyway, they can even adopt the mood of Shantaras. But then, beyond all of those 4, Naparyeham. They have a sweetness, a love, a complete Atmanivedanam, a complete surrender of the self to Krishna, that Krishna ultimately comes to the conclusion, Naparyeham. The love that you have for me is so complete, is without any consideration for yourself, that I will never be able to repay you. And in fact, it mesmerizes Krishna to such an extent that he comes down as this, as with his Hladini potency, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, just to see the sweetness of that Sthayi Bhav. So those 5 Sthayi Bhavs, those loves, ultimately go through 4 different lenses, which I'll quickly go through now: Vibhav, Anubhav, Sattvika Bhav, and Vyabhichari Bhav. These 4 different things, one is a trigger, one is a deliberate action, one is involuntary transformation, and one is a passing emotion. When those 4 are connected with your Sthayi Bhav, then you start to feel ras. You start to feel ras. And it's such a science. So to recap, I mean, that in itself is a whole seminar going on to the Sthayi Bhav. But the point of it is, the point of all of this is that the material world is ultimately spiritual if we have the consciousness to see it. We can elevate our consciousness with practical tips, just like the son of a demon can become the greatest of all great through contemplating the Lord's activities. We've seen another verse from Bhagavatam where say just the chanting of the holy name can mean that somebody who's born in a dog eater's family can have the highest qualification. So we can cultivate this consciousness. We should cultivate this consciousness, and cultivating this consciousness is to our eternal benefit. The other things of this world will ultimately be a distraction if we have not gone to our real purpose, just like being in the airport. Forget the airport, get to the gate. Within that highest consciousness, that Purna Vikashita Chetana, in that highest consciousness, there are Sthayi Bhav Mahabhav, Sthayi Bhav Anubhav Mahabhav. Within Sthayi Bhav, if we can awaken what our true relationship with Krishna is, we will get that higher taste. We will get that higher taste whereby we will no longer be distracted with the things of this world, which are not to our ultimate benefit. And we can actually achieve that hankering, fulfill that hankering in our heart that we are artificially looking for in all sorts of ways in this world. We can get that happiness, which is greater than Wimbledon. I know, Anshu, you were there. Greater than Wimbledon, winning Wimbledon, 3 sets, 6 love, 6 love, 6 love, and the whole crowd goes wild. Whatever bliss you think that would give you, that is a fragment of a fragment of a fragment of a fragment of what your heart would really experience when it's re-established in its Sthayi Bhav, which ultimately comes to full fruition in rasa of loving Krishna. Ooh. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Are there any questions, comments, corrections? Please, wonderful devotees.
Hare Krishna. Dana Pranams Prabhuji. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much for your session and your deep realizations today. And your classes are really full of scientific nectar. Really, how I wish even these professionals in science field can listen to you talk. Thank you for taking us through the stages. And hopefully we can get to the fully bloom consciousness and we can have our consciousness less covered. I would like to open up to any devotees with a question or a comment. It will be great. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. May I, Murli Gopal?
Yes, please, Mataji.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for this wonderful session today. Please accept my pranams. I have missed some classes, but I'm planning to catch up. Thank you for all the realizations that you have shared. I know you had to hurry up the Sthayi Bhava, Anubhava, and Mahabhava because of time constraints. But Sthayi Bhava would be in the Shant Ras, like the dhoti of Krishna, which Balram is. And Mahabhava would be the gopis, the bhava that gopi has. Please, can you give us an example of Anubhava? I mean, I missed that.
So Anubhav, in this context, I think the best thing to do is to read it in the Nectar of Devotion and how Sthayi Bhav progresses to Anubhav, then progresses to Mahabhav. Okay, so you see, once the Sthayi Bhav is reawakened, just as a concept, just once the Sthayi Bhav is awakened, so Sthayi Bhav needs to pass through. Sthayi Bhav is the mood, right? So we have that 5 principal moods. There are then 4 lenses. Okay, we're going to get into it now. Okay, so okay, there's no shortcut around it, so let's do it. Sthayi Bhav is the permanent mood. You then have Vibhav, Anubhav, Sattvika Bhav, and Vyabhichari Bhav, right? So if let's give the example. An example is often given of a feast, right? So Sthayi Bhav, the principal mood is like your appetite or your hunger. The Vibhav is the raw ingredients, right? These are the objects of love. These are, like, for example, Krishna, the Guru, right? So then Anubhav is the process of engaging in service, engaging in a particular service to the Lord, right? The Vyabhichari Bhav is like the flavors. And the Sattvika Bhav is like the spontaneous reaction, like your mouth watering. And then the ras is what ultimately the whole experience of having that banquet. Okay, so Sthayi Bhav is your mood. So if we are using the example of devotional service, it's your underlying mood of wanting to serve Krishna in a particular way. Or if you're giving the feast analogy, it's your hunger, your appetite. You then need something to put together for that feast, right? You need the main ingredients of that feast. So for devotional service, you need yourself, you need the Lord, and you need a particular forum and some kind of activities. In a feast, you would need particular ingredients, you would need spices and things which need to be put together, right? So that's Vibhav. Anubhav is the action of actually putting that into your mouth, or the action of actually serving Krishna. Once you've got the forum, then you need to engage in the activity. So I want to garland Krishna and Radharani, right? So the Vibhav is that I have the garland and I see Radha and Krishna in front of me on a beautiful throne. And then the Anubhav is the action of me actually garlanding them. The Vyabhichari Bhav are the experiences which happen, right? So if I take a mouthful, maybe it's sweet, maybe it's salty, maybe it's spicy, maybe it's warm, maybe it's succulent, maybe it's jelly-like. The Vyabhichari Bhav, there's 33 of them, is the feelings that I have when I actually garland the true form of Radha and Krishna standing in front of me. So there's 33 different Vyabhichari Bhavs. Let's see if I've got them listed comprehensively. I want to speculate because this is Nectar of Devotion. It should never be. What are the 33 different paths? I had that somewhere. So, for example, you have sudden anxiety, chinta. Is this garland beautiful enough to be put around Krishna's neck? Or sudden joy. Maybe Krishna turns his eye and looks at me and gives me a smile. Imagine Krishna looked in your direction and gave you a smile. What kind of joy do you feel? Or dainya, you feel totally unworthy. You see all of these beautiful gopis who are there, right? Who have served Krishna so faultlessly, who are waiting to queue up behind you to put a garland. Who are you to be putting a garland on Radha and Krishna when all of these incredible servants are there behind you? So these spontaneous emotions, which are almost like flavors, you see how they support the Sthayi Bhav, right? And then Sattvika Bhav, then the spontaneous emotion. Maybe you see Krishna and all of a sudden you just break out into a huge smile. Maybe your hair stand on end. Maybe you start crying, maybe you feel like jumping for joy. It's like a sudden burst reaction. Like if you see, sometimes you see something, they say it's mouth watering. It's not a concerted thing, it's a spontaneous reaction. So once you understand your sthayi bhav, and you have these four vibhav, vyabhachari bhav, anubhav, and sattvika bhav underneath it, that will then make the rasa, right? So anubhav is one of the four processes which will take sthayi bhav and actually create the rasa, the actual enjoyment of a particular sthayi bhav. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I want to, sorry. Does that make sense?
Yes, Prabhu, it does.
Okay. Sorry. Without getting, all of this is given by Srila Prabhupada in Nectar of Devotion, which is obviously a summary study, not summary, but a compilation of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Rupa Goswami. So the real science of how we love God, of how we transform our consciousness from being so preoccupied with the inconsequential things of this world, right? Which even if we achieve everything in this world, will ultimately forsake us at the time of death. Scientifically, how to understand our mood, how to put it into practice, to get the enjoyment that we're actually hankering for. And all of us still think that if we make $1 billion and we get the biggest house and the fastest car and have the strongest body and all the fame, that we'll be actually happy. And we'll spend all of our life searching for that or lamenting that we don't have it. But actually the science of how to be really happy, how to understand what it is that we're really hankering for and how to actually achieve it is given in the Nectar of Devotion. And if we spent even a fraction of the time doing that, we would be permanently happy. Rather than if we spend our whole lifetime doing this and we achieve it, like George Harrison said, I've been to the top of the wall. I had all the money and the fame and everything. And actually there's nothing there. There's nothing there. That's the beauty of the process Prabhupada's giving us.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. And even in the material world, I think you go through these phases, or at least few of them. For example, if you, for the love of the child, you go through the hankering, and then there is raw materials that he or she is the object of your love, and then you start serving this baby. And then you have various flavors with the baby.
But the beautiful thing is that Krishna has given this system of Sakam Karma Yoga, Nishkam Karma Yoga, and ultimately all of our worldly duties, if done under proper guidance and with proper understanding, can ultimately become services. So we can actually engage in those things that we desire if it's regulated as through the eyes of the Veda, and we can actually make it tools for us. We've got our spiritual development and we have our material development. But if we engage in our material activities, we can dovetail this material engagement and use it as a tool for our spiritual realization. And come to that point that Bhaktivinoda Thakur has of seeing everything as non-different to Krishna, even raising a child. It can be engaged in that way, but it needs to have proper guidance from the Shastra and from those realized devotees.
True, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Over to you, Murli Gopal.
Hitesh Prabhu, I know you've got a question. You're sitting in Mauritius on the beach, you're enjoying the best this world has to offer, Prabhu.
Yeah, the temperature. Compared to UK. I was thinking about all glories to Srila Prabhupada for giving us his Veda base, hearing from a pure devotee, like hearing the pastime of Krishna, the activities of Krishna. There's no difference in Krishna's activities, Krishna's name, and Krishna himself. So connecting us to Krishna, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. You were saying, like, instead of contemplating on our material problems, even though we have a spiritual goal and even our material goal, instead of contemplating on those things, material things which we couldn't achieve, it's best to contemplate on the activities of Krishna. So thank you, Prabhu, for giving such a nice class. I was thinking about like being fixed in Krishna consciousness means minus sense gratification. And this is possible only by reading Srila Prabhupada's book. Because from Gyan to Vigyan, we have to practice a lot. And the taste for practicing comes only by reading Srila Prabhupada's book, because by our only endeavor, nothing will happen. And you said it, the more we'll contemplate on those material endeavors, the more we'll fall down and get entangled. So it's best to contemplate on Krishna's activities and just accept things as per Krishna's big plan for us. Thank you, Prabhu.
And here's the thing, Krishna, in that part of Bhagavad Gita, I know we went through a lot of things. In 261 or 2,
Yeah.
Krishna says, just by artificially removing yourself from something doesn't mean that will give up the taste for that thing. You need to have the higher taste. Sometimes the higher taste comes by engaging in something completely different. Sometimes the higher taste comes by engaging in that thing that you desire and offering the activity and the fruits of that activity to the Lord. And that is why having guides and mentors in our life who can say, you know, stay away from this, or you have this proclivity, engage this in Krishna, engage in that, but offer it to Krishna. That's why it's important. If I've got an addiction to whiskey, stay away from that. If I've got an addiction to cooking or to having delicious food, I can engage that. Go to the temple, learn 100 dishes, you know, Govardhan Puja, serve all of the Vaishnavas. Fulfill that desire of yours, but engage it in Krishna. And having mentors who can guide you, because we can't artificially. Sometimes we have to just give it up and walk away. And sometimes that hankering means that we can't give it up, so we have to engage in it. And Krishna also says it is better to engage in your own duty imperfectly than the duty of another perfectly. Engage in your duty, your swadharma, your occupational duty imperfectly, rather than artificially adopt the swadharma of somebody else, engage in that perfectly, but not address your desires. Because by engaging in your own nature, by following your own nature, you will purify yourself of that condition. By neglecting it, you will have that residual conditioning, and you will also gain an additional conditioning. Arjuna says, I don't want to fire at my family. I want to go off and live like a monk. And Krishna is saying, what are you talking about? You are my devotee, but you are a Kshatriya. Your job is to shoot arrows. Your job is not swaha. Sarve Bhagavan Nidam Namama. No, that's not you. This is you. Go and do this. Offer it to me. You will be free of this, and then you will come back to me. Don't emulate somebody else. Leave this unfulfilled, gain that conditioning, and be nowhere. So we should understand what our nature is. Don't artificially suppress it. Some things, yes, we have to give up. Some things we can engage in Krishna's service. And that is the art, which we're all trying to figure out in this early stage of ISKCON. But that's what Varnashram helps us do. Embrace the physical form that we have in and dovetail that with our spiritual objectives. That's what we all need.
I don't know, Prabhu. It's a bit debatable, because just a bit, because I know we don't have much time. Because as a devotee, sometimes I know about Varna Ashram. I know about we have to respect our limit. We don't have to imitate others' occupation. But as a devotee, sometimes we should also know how to cook. We should know also how to defend ourselves. We should also know how to serve the Lord. We should also know how to go in the garden. Sometimes we are good in all of them. So what I was saying, like, most probably we have to surrender to Krishna's big plan. Perhaps he wants us to do some specific things compared to others, even though we might be good in all of them. So we just have to go with the flow of Krishna's plan.
Hold on. Being good at something and that being your occupational duty are two different things.
Yeah.
Krishna, as Brihanala, was masquerading as a eunuch and was teaching girls how to dance.
Yeah.
He was fantastic at it. he went in seamlessly. He was taught by Urvashi in the heavenly planets. Arjuna's occupational duty, he wasn't like, should I be a dancer or should I be Sarvashreshthana, the greatest archer the world has ever seen? No. Bhim was a fantastic cook. He went as Balav. Bhim was incognito as Balav. Bhim wasn't like, should I be the greatest mace warrior or should I be a cook because I'm a good cook? No. Being good at it and it being your indivisible occupational duty as per your psychophysical nature you find yourself in is different. It's different. There is a calling that we have. Krishna is saying this in Bhagavad Gita. You have a calling in this world. For some people, it is renunciation completely, to live a monastic life and to serve the Lord in that way. And of course, even in the 5th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, it said that if you attempt to give your whole life to Krishna, but you fall short, nothing is lost, even if you screw up your occupational activity. But if you go and just say, this is all too difficult, let me just chill out in the ashram, capriciously, no. Krishna says, don't do that. Find out what you're here to do. Find out where you are in the Varna, engage that in my service, under guidance, cultivate spiritual knowledge and spiritual activity. These will merge into one. You will give up this condition, you'll go back to Godhead. Don't just say, what's easiest, right? I'm scared of doing anything. Don't clear off your psychophysical nature, which you were born with. Inherit another psychophysical nature and get even more confused. Also, don't cultivate your spiritual life properly. And then, punir mushtika bha. Again, you take another birth. So we have to, and Prabhupada wanted this. He said, half of my work is done, right? Which is Bhagavat Marg. But Varnashram Dharma, actually how we are supposed to live and exist in this world. All of us have computers. We've paid for these computers. We all have internet we're paying. How are we paying for it? Who are we working for? Where are we getting the money from? We're not just Srivas Thakur sitting in the corner. We're all working. Are we working in a way which is according to our psychophysical nature? Or is it just like, suck it and see? I'm not criticizing anyone, but for the future generations, they should be able to, even their work, even when they're making money, they should do it in such a way that they are engaging their nature, to be able to engage that in Krishna's service, to be able to purify them of it, rather than having this residual sense of lack of fulfillment, which many of us feel, even as devotees. Anyway, we can speak about, that is a whole topic. We'll speak about that offline. Well, anyway, late one. Everyone's gone to bed.
Murli Gopal.
Wow, thank you so much for those beautiful questions and comments. Mataji, would you like, Mataji, would you like to end the session for us today? Thank you so much. I'm glad today you are available.
Thank you very much, Murli Gopal, for giving me the honor and holding the fort in my absence. I'm truly indebted to you. Let us all chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra once in glorification of KrishnaArjuna Das Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,
Hare Hare.
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhayeva
Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah.
Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
ISKCON Eldoret ki jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Praise KrishnaArjuna Das Prabhuji ki jai.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Mataji, you must see me before you leave London. I'm not happy. When are you going to the manor?
I think on the 12th, Sunday the 12th. But we'll liaise.
Okay, perfect. Murli Gopal Prabhu, when are you coming to London?
We shall also
Come with Mataji soon, okay? We'll show you we'll show you Radha Gokulananda.
Jai. Hare Krishna. Krishna.